Somewhere deep in the Cambodian jungle, where vines cling like forgotten memories, a temple weeps through its stones, and not even the rain can wash away the screams trapped within. The forest had long reclaimed the temple. Prazit Kesser stood buried beneath centuries of moss, strangled fig roots, and the thick breath of monsoon clouds. Its towers leaned with age, its carvings softened by time. But beneath the quiet decay, the stones still pulsed with a story no one wanted to remember. The villagers never went near it. They said the temple bled in the rain, and that at night, when the wind came down from the mountains, you could hear voices, not loud, not angry, but sorrowful. Women's voices, chanting broken hymns and whispering to children who weren't there. Back in the empire's twilight years, when the great stone city still glittered under the sun and the priests walked in gold, Prazit Kesser served a different purpose. It was not built for worship, not really. It was a place of silence, of judgment. A place where sins were bled from the body, and the screams of the impure were counted as prayers. Jayavarman VIII ruled with a trembling fist. The emperor, once a protector of the Buddhist order, had turned on it with fury. He cast out the monks, burned their scrolls, and replaced gentle dharma with the fire of ancient gods. Temples once filled with quiet chants were given over to a new law, the law of fear. And in forgotten corners like Kesser, men like Om-Senek flourished. Om-Senek wore no gold. He kept no wives, held no feasts. But he held power greater than a prince. He was the temple's high priest, and his gods demanded obedience. To him, women were vessels to be purified. They bled, they bore, and when they defied the sacred rhythm, they were broken. Surya never meant to challenge the gods. She was a healer, nothing more. Her mother had died in the flood years, and the temple had taken her in as a child. But it was not the priests who raised her, it was old Mei Len, a blind woman who lived by the riverbank. Mei Len taught her to stitch wounds, to crush herbs, to read the sky for fever winds. And quietly, in whispered lullabies, she taught her the old ways, the soft prayers of Theravada, the ones the empire now called treason. Surya grew into a woman with eyes like storms and hands that could calm a screaming child. Mothers came to her in secret, hiding from the temple's suspicion. She delivered babies in the rice fields and healed infected wounds with bitter root water. And though she never asked for coin, the people loved her. And that was her mistake. One night, a boy came running to her hut, bleeding from the mouth. His teeth were black, his fever high. His parents had gone to the temple for help, but the priests had turned them away. It is karma, they were told. Let the boy pass. Surya ignored them. She worked through the night, using honey and bark ash to draw out the rot. The boy survived. But someone saw. Someone whispered her name where they shouldn't. 3 nights later, under a sky smeared with thunderclouds, the temple bell tolled at midnight. It was not a sound meant for worship. Everyone knew that. The bell at midnight was a summons, not for the gods, but for punishment. It rang only when a soul had strayed too far and needed to be returned to order. Surya was barefoot when they came. The guards wore masks carved like apsaras, stone-faced dancers with cruel smiles. They said nothing as they seized her. Her neighbors watched from behind doors that would not open, from windows that closed like blinking eyes. No one called her name. No one dared. She was marched through the jungle under the pounding rain, her white robe clinging to her skin like a burial shroud. The forest swallowed the procession, and then, silence. Beneath Prazit Kesser, where the jungle roots cracked the earth and stone, there was a chamber. Not marked on any scroll. Not spoken of in any chant. It was carved with old symbols, remnants of a time before the empire knew mercy. Hooks still hung from the ceiling, their iron rusted but intact. There were stains on the floor that no season could scrub clean. That night, the high priest lit the incense of correction and recited the laws. She had defied the gods, he said. She had healed without sanction. She had spoken in the forbidden tongue. She had turned her back on the order of men. And for that, the gods demanded blood. But Surya did not scream. Even when they bound her wrists. Even when they burned the symbols of Brahma into her back with heated coins. Even when they forced her to kneel on jagged stones until her knees bled. She looked at Om-Senek with something between pity and disgust. You will fade, she whispered. But we will remain. He slapped her with an open hand, breaking 2 of her teeth. 3 days passed. She was given no food, no water. Only chants. Only echoes. At night, she was left alone with the carved faces on the walls, watching her in silence. On the 4th day, a boy no older than 15, a novice, crept into the chamber. He knelt beside her, trembling, and held out a handful of rice and a bowl of rainwater. His hands shook so badly it spilled on her feet. "Why?" she asked. The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Because you helped my brother. He still lives." Saria leaned forward, her voice cracking from thirst. "Then remember me." That night, the priest announced her death. But there was no body laid out, no fire lit, no ashes returned. She was not mentioned again. Her name vanished from temple records. Her hut was burned. Her belongings thrown into the river. But when the rains came, the villagers said the temple changed. They said the stones began to seep water even when the sky was dry. They said vines grew faster near the altar. They said the faces on the walls wept. And when the bell tolled, once, then twice, they no longer listened. A generation later, the temple fell to ruin. Trees tore through its roof. Birds nested in its towers. The priests fled with the empire's collapse, and Prazit Kesar was left to the jungle. But the chamber remained. Buried. Forgotten. Until now, perhaps. They say you can still hear her cries when the rain hits the temple just right, and if you listen closely, they are not cries for help, but cries for those she left behind. The chamber did not welcome the living. It crouched beneath the earth like a wound that refused to close, cold even in the wet heat of the jungle. Light barely touched it, only thin veins of sun slipped through hairline cracks in the stone, painting the floor in fractured gold. The air was thick with rot and incense. Hooks hung from the ceiling like forgotten punctuation, and the ground was carved with shallow troughs to carry blood away. Saria had not seen the sky in 6 days. They had stripped her of everything. Her robe, her name, her right to speak. She was given only a piece of woven mat to kneel on, though by now the skin on her knees had broken open. The scent of old blood, long since dried into the cracks of the stone, mingled with the smell of damp flesh and copper. She did not cry. She would not give them that. The chants echoed through the temple above, thin male voices droning the same verse again and again. A hymn of purification. But here, beneath the world of gods and men, their prayers turned hollow. She could hear her heartbeat louder than the chants now. Slower than before. Fainter. They had burned her with incense sticks on the 3rd day. Not flames, that would leave marks. No, they pressed hot coals against the base of her spine, the insides of her arms, under her chin, where the pain would never quite leave but the scars might be hidden. She did not scream then either. They wanted her to scream. They wanted to write it in the ledger, she confessed. But she said nothing. She had learned silence long ago. Once, she had spoken with joy, a child abandoned at the temple gate, swaddled in rags and barely breathing. The monks did not want her, but old Banti Jataka had taken her in, fed her rice water with his own hands, wrapped her in saffron cloth, and taught her that the world did not belong to kings. It belonged to mercy. By the time she was 10, she could recite sutras from memory and name every herb that grew near the riverbank. She healed animals with poultices and delivered the son of the rice merchant's wife in the dead of night, using only steam, chant, and oil. But her hands, once praised, became dangerous the moment they healed too well, and too freely. There was no place for women who did not kneel in the right direction, no place for truth that did not serve the priesthood. They began her trial on the 5th day. It was called the trial of silence, a test of the soul's purity. She was untied but forbidden to move. Forbidden to speak. Forbidden even to blink too long, lest they call it a flinch. The guards stood in the corners like stone pillars, watching her, eyes sharp, spears sharper. One slip, one cough, one twitch of muscle, and she would be dragged to the hooks. She knelt, bloodied legs trembling beneath her, the sharp edges of the carvings biting into her skin. Time dissolved. There was no hunger, no thirst. Only the distant sound of bells and her own breath echoing through the hollow of her chest. She remembered a woman once, Khmer, who bled for 3 days after giving birth, her body too weak to let go. The temple had abandoned her. Saria had walked 6 miles to bring her broth. She had knelt at her side as the baby suckled and whispered prayers in the old tongue. Khmer had lived. The baby too. And in that moment, Saria had believed the gods watched with kindness. Now she knew better. When the guards changed shifts, one of them left the chamber door slightly open. Just a sliver. It was enough to let in the smell of fire. The smell of rain. She imagined the sky outside, dark and thick with storm, the kind of clouds that made the river rise and the frogs sing. She clung to the memory like a thread. If she could remember the sky, she hadn't lost everything. Later that night, when even the guards had stopped pretending to watch her, she shifted slightly. Her back was stiff, muscles locked like iron. Her fingers brushed the ground, searching blindly. Dust. Pebble. A sliver of stone, sharp as a needle. She moved only when no one looked. There, near the rear wall, was the shelf. No one ever spoke of it. No prayers carved there, no images of gods, just a patch of stone scarred with names. Some were barely legible, clawed into the rock with blood or bone. Neri, Sophia, Kanha. Names of women no one remembered. Names that did not appear in temple records or royal decrees. Women who had knelt here just like her, breathing the same foul air, bleeding into the same grooves. With the stone sliver hidden beneath her palm, Saria added hers. Slow, patient strokes. The stone tore her skin, and she left red streaks behind her name, but she carved it deep. Saria. It was the only thing they could not take. On the 7th night, the boy returned. He was younger than she remembered, perhaps 14, maybe 15. His mask was gone. His face was round and frightened, eyes wide like a doe's. He stepped in quietly, barefoot, holding a small clay bowl. The water inside trembled with each step. He knelt before her without a word, hands shaking so badly he spilled half the bowl before it reached her lips. She drank. When her lips parted, it was not for prayer. Not for apology. Just 3 words, soft as ash. Don't forget my name. The boy stared at her, nodding, tears gathering in his eyes like rain. He tucked the bowl under his arm and left without turning back. She never saw him again. But she knew he would remember. By morning, they announced she had died. There was no procession. No offering to the gods. Her body was never returned to the village. No ashes were scattered. No plaque was carved. Even her name, scratched so carefully into the temple wall, was scraped over with a chisel days later. They called it cleaning the chamber. The next season, the rains returned. They fell harder than before, and Prasit Kesser began to shift. Cracks widened. Roots pushed through the walls. The bell tower collapsed under the weight of its own silence. But deep beneath the temple, the stones still whispered. And so she knelt, spine broken but soul unshaken, under the blind eye of gods, a whisper of defiance echoing beneath stone that no one dared touch again.